Hey, Warrior Saints, good morning. Welcome to our Crucifixional live stream. Glad to have you, beautiful people, in with us. We are having a great week. Hope you are as well. Visit us, warriorsaints.org. That's where you can find your copy of the book, The Way of the Warrior Saint. If you don't have it, please get it. If you do have it, love a review. We appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. We're talking today about predestination. So there is a theory or a theology in some Protestant circles and in others where the reading of Romans chapter 8, we find this word predestined, predestination, where it means, and I'm going to obviously just be unfair and totally simplify the theology behind this, but the idea is that somehow God predestined people for the kingdom. So it was determined by him, God, long ago, that these certain people whom he predestined will automatically get into the kingdom of heaven. It's already been said. And by extension, therefore, there are people who have been predestined not to enter the kingdom when they die. Now, that's a simplification of the theology, so for those who subscribe to it, forgive. I recognize that. But that's the main thrust of it. And so people often wonder, well, what is that all about? And when we come across this reading from Romans 8, 29, 30, 31, that whole section, we hear the following. So listen to the words, and then we'll talk about it and see what it means for us. We know that in everything, this is Romans 8, 28 and following, so just listen and Greg will put some of the text on the screen for you. We know that in everything God works for good with those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brethren, him being Christ in that case. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. And so in this language, if you read the text literally, you're going to say, oh, well, he knew you before. He then, predestined you, and then he called you into action. But as we know, especially with Scripture, literalism is the death of the intellect. Right? So when you read literally, especially with Holy Scripture, you're going to get lost and you're going to fall into false teachings, false understandings of the gospel of Jesus Christ and ultimately of the Christian faith. So what does it mean when he says, I foreknew you and predestined and all this kind of stuff? Here's a good example, hopefully to put it into perspective. I have a beautiful bride, the most beautiful woman in the world. Love her. We've been married for over 20 years and been together even longer. We started dating when we were in college and so on. I met her when I was a teenager. So I was 15 when I met her. She was 13. We were doing church work in Mexico, building homes for homeless. And our two youth groups from two different cities came together. We met. Boom. From there, it was a fantastic story. However, when I talk to her, I say things to her like, I have loved you my whole life. Well, have I? I mean, I didn't know her till I was 15, right? So how did I love her from 0 to 14? Do you understand? Like it is a way of speaking. It is an emphasis, an emphatic, I might even say a literary device to impress upon her that my heart has always been hers. Even before we started dating, I dated other women, right? And I wasn't thinking about her at that time. So did I love her my whole life? I mean, obviously you know the answer, and you know that it is a way of aggrandizing language, speaking larger in order to make the point. So it's like I say to you, oh my gosh, it was a million times harder than I thought. Really? What does that mean, a million times harder? You're speaking with literary device for emphasis in order to say, boom, this is big. Likewise, we see that also in Holy Scripture. So God says to the prophet Jeremiah early in the text, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you, right? Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. So God is saying to Jeremiah, I have had my eyes on you from the beginning, right? Now, did God know Jeremiah before he was formed in the womb because God is omniscient, knows everything? Okay, fine, right? But don't miss the point. Don't mix and mess Scripture up and twist it so that you can be a literalist and get lost in predestination, all right? So with all of that in mind, when we come back to our Romans text, those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Now, if you want to read that literally, you're welcome to do so. There are people that have done that. But if you want to read it correctly, you're going to see that the statement that Paul is making when he speaks about God in Romans 8 is to say that God has had in his mind for you to be great beginning. Like, that's his plan, his God's plan. His plan is for us to be great, right? And so he just, that's the way Paul talks about it. It's like, it's from the beginning. He knew, he predestined, this was his design, this was his purpose, right? For you. And that doesn't mean you, a select group, versus you, the group that he left out. It's for you, all of it, right? All right, so here, I'm a West Virginian, right? Like when we say y'all, right? Like it means all y'alls, right? Everybody, right? It's just that generic third person plural, everybody, right? Like that's how it is to be understood when you read this text in Romans 8. The predestination is like, look, the plan of God from the beginning has been for you, all y'alls, everybody, right? To be called into this position, this role, this life as a warrior saint. Everybody's been called to that. Some have rejected it, some have accepted it. But the statement is that it's been from the beginning, and like the plan is all the way through. So just like I aggrandize language to say to my wife, I've loved you my whole life, right? And that means that I want no other. I'm only with her now, even though I may have met her when I was 15 and on. Likewise, in Romans, that is a statement, this word predestined, proorisen, like from the root of the word horizon, right? Like you could see all the way to the end, right? The edge. It is to say that God has had in his plan that all of us who hear his gospel have been chosen and predestined to walk the path, right? So it's a statement, a literary device to call you into action. So that you might, like, we're seeking greatness. Greg, throw that verse back up. I want to read it to you again. Look at the second half of that. That, excuse me, he predestined to be conformed, simorphos, right? Like metamorphosized. That's the root of the word where we get metamorphosis, when a butterfly changes, right? So he's had in his plan this idea for all of us to be changed into the image of his son, to look like Jesus. And I don't mean look like him physically, but to look like him in your life as crucifixional, right? In order that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he justified. Or this from the word for righteousness, dikeos. And those whom he made righteous, he also glorified, right? Like the statement there, I love this text from St. Basil. There's a writing he has on the human being. He's pounding it into us that we've been called to be great, right? Like Basil says it, called to be great. And so that calling, that predestination, though it is not literally one group at the expense of another, it's a literary device to say all of us have been called into that greatness, that glorification of living a crucifixional life, to be Christ-like. That's great. Christ is great, right? I think we can all agree on that. So if we are conformed, metamorphosized into looking like Christ, that's awesome and that's great. That's what we're all called to. So this Romans text is not to be literal. It is to say it's a plea, a begging to all of us who hear that text to live a Christ-like crucifixional life. But when you do that, here's the good news, is that greatness awaits, right? So now, that is... living that Christ-like life is challenging. It's hard. It's not easy. You know that, and I know that, because life out there is chaotic. I mean, the chaotic waters that is the modern milieu are really difficult to navigate. But there is help so that you can find your healthiness in your physical health, your financial well-being, your relationships with your spouses, with your kids, with your children, with coworkers, with God. Right? So all of that can be found and guided through the way of the warrior saint. That's exactly what St. Paul is calling us to. That it is exactly how we spend our time in this ministry. And that is the only reason why we constantly beg you to join us on the way of the warrior saint. If you visit our website, you can subscribe to the library, which is filled with all of those teachings to help us as we are striving to fulfill the call that God has made for us, made to us. Love you, beautiful people. We're going to be back tomorrow. Till then, as always, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.